So thank you everybody for coming to this product meetup. Today we have Eilon Reshef, who's the co-founder and the chief product officer at Gong, which is a really special product and company, and which pretty much reached stardom very, very, very quickly and became a unicorn extremely quickly. And it's mostly due to the fact that the product is just really good and that they have raving fans. And I asked Eilon to tell us like how they got there and what makes them so successful, like how their product, like how they work internally. And so what he's going to do, he's going to present us with all these topics, and he's going to tell us a little bit about how they work and what their process is. And then we're going to have like a Q&A on each subject. So maybe I'll ask a question, Ram will ask a question, and then the audience will ask some questions, and then we'll move on to the other topic. If that's okay with everyone, just give me a thumbs up, everybody. That sounds good to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Just before, yeah. So just before we start, I want to thank Gong for sponsoring this event, but they're not sponsoring only this event because they help us with previous event and will help us in the future. So thank you, Gong, and thank you, Romy, for being such a great part in this great experience. And I want to also give a big hand to Gal, our CMO, that arranged everything and made sure you all know about it and come over. And she's doing an amazing and fantastic job arranging these. Thank you, Gal. And now, for Eilon, are you going to share your screen with us?
Let me do this. So first of all, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining today. I'm going to try this really fun Zoom feature where you can actually drag yourself on top of other slides. So hopefully that works well. I'm practicing, so if it doesn't work, we're gonna go to normal stuff. It's beta. And what I'll try to talk today is how to create raving fans for your product. Share several approaches, techniques, ideas that we have at Gong. Obviously, we didn't figure everything out, not even implying to. But hope to share like some of the learnings we've had, some of the principles we've developed. And as Orit and Ram mentioned before, I mean, let's keep it interactive. If you have questions, I don't know if you by the intent is like chat or jump in, but yeah, let's kind of have it, let's make it interactive. So first of all, in terms of background, Gong has been, I'll kind of move myself here so you see it's like we've kind of been voted. It's actually fun to sort of play with yourself. So like we've been voted like a high satisfaction product in a site called G2, which is like a software review site, sort of like for 2 years in a row, 2021, 2022. I'm going to do my best to keep this ranking in the foreseeable future. But kind of customers like our software. So that's kind of part of the background. And what I want to cover is 5 topics. I don't know if we're going to get to all 5. So if we don't get to all 5, we're going to get to however many we can. But
you have to do another one.
Yeah, we'll have
a we can always like have a follow-on, or we can stay until midnight, whatever. I'm here. So I try to be a little bit provocative here. That's the only slide that has like many words. So I was kind of trying to maybe one of our operating principles at Gong is challenge conventional wisdom, and a few things that we're doing that may fall under this. So I'm going to start with the structure of product and engineering and how does this work, or why product and engineering teams should never have a conflict. I'm hearing some in other companies, product and engineering do have conflicts. In our case, we don't, and that goes to structure. How do you co-innovate with customers? How do you kind of make stuff that doesn't work and get it to eventually work? How do you deal with enterprise customers? Many B2B companies like ourselves, I'm going to tell about, share with you 5 minutes, well, 2 minutes about Gong, but we sell to companies, and it's always like those strategic customers who come with like weird requests. How do you actually not make them bad requests, but good requests? How do you innovate fast? And what I'm going to be challenging everybody here is why you should never have deadlines and why Scrum and sprints are a very, very bad idea. So I'm keeping it to a little bit later on. So if you're really a big fan of deadlines and big fan of sprints, you're going to have to go through the first 3 sections. And then if we have time, we're going to go to autonomous software, which is why we think some of the SaaS software is not going to be around in 10 to 20 years and what's going to replace it. So trying to make this a little bit kind of off the beaten track. And we can just start. One of the things that's happening here is I can't move forward once somebody's chatting. So let's see if this thing doesn't work. I'll just, 1 second. Okay, there we go. So the point is not to talk about Gong, so just like give you background in terms of the discussion. What Gong does as a business, We are B2B software. We market to revenue teams, anybody who works with customer-facing teams. And what we do is, let's move this one, is our solution captures all of the conversations that, think about salespeople or customer success people or whatever, have with customers, video, phone, email, etc. We analyze it. There is AI, machine learning, and other things. And then we deliver guidance to people. And the type of guidance that we give, and I'm showing you a couple of examples. This is not a product demo of in any way. This is an example of a board. We call it a board, where a manager or a sales representative can see all of their deals. This is like the heat map of the activity. This tells them when the next call is, etc. And there is a lot of like, excuse me, any question? No. So this is like an example of a page people use to manage their entire, what people call pipeline, inspect it and understand the deals. Again, not getting into the details here. There's AI-based risk. There's drill downs, just to give you a concept of like what Gong is. The other thing is this is a call review thing. We record the call. There's a way to sort of like listen to the call itself. You can record in Zoom and listen in Zoom, but Zoom is not going to show you like at the bottom, like who is speaking when, what are the topics, what are the keywords, what is the sentiment, and so on. I'm going to touch on this in the end if we have time, but it just give you the idea of who Gong is as a business, not so much to talk about functionality. In terms of ourselves, in terms of where we are, founded 6 years ago-ish, we have 3,000 customer-ish, anywhere from small startups to people like Google and Amazon and ADP and others. Last round we did was about a year ago. We kind of were at the 7 billion and change. About 1,000 people. I don't know if we're going to be more or, I mean, maybe 1,000-ish. Maybe today there's going to be more. And about my team, product team is about 50 people. I'm one of the founders. I had a product team. And I started as a CTO, also did engineering, and then moved over to do the product team. So one of the reasons we have customers who like us is because we have operating principles in the company. One of them is just called create raving fans. This means that everybody in the company is concentrated around the idea of having raving fans, meaning customers that like us. We normally wouldn't sell to customers who are not going to benefit from the product. We normally wouldn't, if somebody's unhappy, we'll give them back their money, whatever the thing is. And that actually bubbles down to not just product, of course, to all of the organization. Salespeople are going to do their best not to sell something that we don't do. Customer success people are going to try to make customers successful in every way possible versus just retain them, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to the product, there's things that we do in the product team that are directly, I think, impact this idea of raving fans. So the first thing I want to talk about is structure. And it's kind of interesting because you'd expect, like when you talk about how to create products that have raving fans, you kind of expect people to start with strategy and I don't know what it is, GUI or UX or other things. But I think a lot of the things kind of stem from how you even organize the teams, because then it kind of drives the outcomes you want. If you have wrong structure, it's very hard to get to those outcomes. So that's why I start with the structure. There's nothing I'm going to tell you here is that, well, almost everything I'm going to tell you here is not innovative in the sense that other people do this as well. I think we've kind of taken it to an extreme, which kind of makes it maybe more interesting. So the first component, and maybe you came across this before, is the idea of autonomous product teams. It's about 10 people. If you've ever saw the Amazon principles, they have this idea of 2 pizza teams. If you can't feed people with 2 pizzas, just break the team down. Kind of same idea. And the idea in autonomous product teams, this is a team. Think about 10 people, 8 people, 7 people, 12 people. I mean, this is kind of ballpark-ish. And these people can develop, it's like a startup within a startup. They can develop an area. I'm going to talk in a second what an area is. And the team is a product manager, PM, product designer, UX, a bunch of engineers, front end, back end. The idea is like they get all of the manpower, so to speak, to sort of get stuff done. And then typically there's part-time product writers, analysts, and other things. Each one of those teams is focusing on a specific area, meaning they don't develop features. They develop areas in the sense of like, hey, coaching could be one pod, we call it a pod, whatever. And one pod could work for coaching. And the pipeline thing I showed you before, this could be a pod responsible for pipeline inspection. There could be a pod responsible for collaboration. I go to a team, I want to share it with my manager. How do I do this? The idea they can autonomously execute. So if they decide they want to do something, they don't need almost anybody else within the organization. They need the office manager to open the door. They need IT to buy them like computers, but otherwise they can execute. There's very little dependencies. That's part of the magic because they have everything inside. And of course, it goes back to how you architect the software, right? Very, very few dependencies, operate like a startup. And the team is very engaged just because they are all focused on one use case. They all know it. Engineers know it. I was walking with a PM to a meeting the other day, and we're just chatting about this. He wanted to pick my brain around some, I don't know, UX thing or product feature. I can't even remember. And one of the engineers was in the room, and I was like, I don't know, try this, whatever. And the engineer kind of raised their hand and like, oh, what about that persona? And it's funny because the engineer is like asking me about personas, which is obviously very rare, but obviously also very, very beneficial. So, so this is kind of the thing you're seeing. Where the rest of the organization comes, I'm a chief product officer. I have no idea what these people do. I mean, they tell me from time to time, and they pick my brain annually. We do an annual plan. They pick my brain more a little way quarterly. I mean, here's the things we plan to develop. We have a monthly call where they kind of update where they are, but I normally don't get to kind of affect or impact the specific functionality. I could if I wanted to, but generally I wouldn't want to. It's funny because one of our ops people, we have a product ops team, they came back to me and said, what if we created this dashboard for you where like everything that's being developed, you're going to see like green, yellow, red. And I'm like, I don't think it's going to help me because I have no idea what they're developing. So if like they're going to develop X and I don't know the X is, what's information is, why would I know if it's yellow if I have no idea what it is? And of course, like I'm not that detached. I know what they're developing conceptually, like coaching, I know that they're going to solve this problem, but they might slice it into sub features. And I don't know what slice 1 is and slice 2 and slice 3. So I like red, yellow doesn't mean anything to me. And they decide how to break it down and what to include in each version. So, there are some elements, I'm just going to give you that. So this is like, there are some elements they get from the organization, like AI machine learning is not part of the pod. And I'm happy to, maybe I'll stop here and maybe take a few questions. Happy to also talk like where this breaks, not just works. But let's stop here and see if there's any kind of questions.
Okay, I'll start with one question and then we'll open it up. I've actually like 2 questions. The first one is, so you're saying like that these mini companies are deciding annually what they're going to do, and you just kind of give them feedback, like there is no strategy, there is no overall strategy. What about like talking about what markets you want to go to and all that stuff? Like how does that work?
Oh, it's a great question. So part of the planning process is, of course, there is a company strategy. So company strategy is not just product, right? It's everything. It's like, you know, in the case of Gong, we're going to launch a couple of new products this year. This is part of the strategy. And of course, we share the strategy with the teams and they kind of work based off that. The other place where the strategy comes in is, of course, like which pods do we have? So like, for example, if we decide to double down on a certain area, we might have 3 pods or 2 pods or 4 pods, or I don't know, if we had more people, maybe 50 pods, right? We don't, right? We're not that big. And then maybe we kind of understaff some of the other pods or remove them. That could happen quarterly or annually. But the pods basically build the agenda. Of course, yeah, they're gonna present it and they're gonna get feedback. It's sort of like this M notation where you kind of got feedback, you revise, you present again, and then they kind of go and execute. But typically not the details in the sense of like, hey, we're developing this feature, fine, we trust you, go build it. And we'll talk how we kind of sanity test this, how we know that they're developing the right thing. That's the next section. But before that, that's pretty much it.
Okay, and the other,
yeah.
Go ahead. The other question I have is you mentioned the product apps. What role do they have? Because it's different in every company and it's pretty new. So at Gong, what are product apps, and is it kind of a service to all the other squads? So.
Yeah, and we do have a product ops team. It's relatively new for us, like not more than a year, but not like 50 years. Actually, we had a meetup in our offices on Sunday, like a pact of people who wanted to learn what this product ops is because nobody knows. And actually, we do have a book that explains how this works. So if anybody, I don't know, if there's a way to get in touch with us later, we're happy to send it to you physically or in a PDF. Product ops supports the rest of the organization. So there's things like release management. There's things like even analytics sits there right now. There's like input management. How do you get all of the feedback and distribute it? There's a little bit of program management. How do you kind of let people know what's going on? But it's basically, yes, it's a support role that's trying to improve the processes and execute some of those processes. Planning, for example.
So we're getting questions from the crowd. It's best if you write them down. It's going to be difficult technically to open the mic for people. So I just like 2 correlating questions from Reut Amir and Amir Goldberg. It's about syncing between the teams. Who handled that, and how do you handle overlaps between those mini companies, making sure everything is in sync?
Yes, it's a great question. So the big challenge with this is like, how do you kind of coordinate, right, all of those teams? And I'll be a little bit provocative here. So if there's a little overlap, I don't really care. It's fine. It's part of the price, right? It's like, there's going to be some overlap because they're independent. Wait. Like there's two ways. Either you synchronize or you make them independent. If you synchronize, they're going to wait on each other. If you make them independent, there's going to be some overlapping work. So as long as within reason, the way we can do it is communication. Quarterly planning, we do get like a holistic view. Everybody can sit in everybody else's planning. So we kind of know during this process that things are not going to go wild. If there's one element that maybe, I don't know, that there's lack of understanding which one develops, they're going to talk and agree. And the other thing is maybe a sister question is consistency is also one of the things we easily give up. This is something every person in my team is going to come and say, hey, it's not consistent. I'm like, okay. Like people care about consistency. I think mostly product managers and UX people care about it. Like I like consistency, don't get me wrong. But if you have to sort of like, what's more important, velocity or consistency? 9 out of 10 cases in the tech world of 2022, velocity is going to be more important because your competitors are more likely to create functionality that you don't have versus like beat you on the consistency. I'd rather that each team works separately, even if it means they're going to go in a little bit of different directions, and then worry about consistency as a secondary priority.
So let's have a last question on this topic so we can move forward. So somebody like Chris Gomez, he asks, how does goal setting work with these pods?
Yeah, so each one of the pods, I mean, now we also a little bit bigger, so we're like 1,000 people. So like in the product org, it's 50, so there's also like groups, and each group or pods define their own like goals, KPIs, think of them. We're not a very like goal-driven company because we tend to think outside in. I'll talk about it in a second. Like, what do the customers benefit versus like, can we move something from 7 to 8 or some internal metric? That people tend to be obsessed about metrics in the sense of like, hey, metrics are essentially a proxy to value, right? You want to get customers to get the value. If you can measure it, that's great. If you can't measure it, doesn't mean the value does not exist. So they're going to set their own goals as part of the quarterly meeting. We're going to like review them and make sure that they make sense and negotiate them in a way, but we're not overly obsessed with them.
Okay.
Want to move on, Ram?
Yeah, let's move on because there's like tons of questions popping up, but I know we have a lot to cover. Let's go on.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of the pod system, here's the thing, I mean, you might have heard this one before. This one is actually pretty unique to Gong, and that's how we actually carry out this innovation. And we co-innovate with customers. And we have two things. I'm going to see, I can join this crowd from the bottom. We have two types of partners to those pods. One is internal liaisons, and these are people within the organization, within the Gong organization. Customer success, sales engineering. If you work in a B2B company, you probably know those titles. Otherwise, think of them as customer service. And each one of those pods has one person in each group, and they can pick their brain. Hey, what do you think this is going to do for sales? Hey, what do you think it's going to do to customer success, etc. Anecdotally, by the way, these people also use Gong, so that we can ask pick their brain as like also a potential user. And that helps us do alignment within the org. Now, alignment within the org, obviously, we're a little bit big now, so you have to do. But probably more important to this is the design partners. And I think what makes me sleep well at night, I sleep very well at night when my cat doesn't wake me up, is that I know that each one of those pods is going to have design partners, like real people with real customers associated with them. So like if I'm a coaching pod, I'm going to have like 5 to 10 people who are either coaches or coachees or I don't know, managers, whatever. And it's like I don't want to say day-to-day, they don't come up to daily meetings. We don't necessarily have daily meetings, but these are people you can actually like communicate with on a very, very regular basis, get their feedback, understand what they do, interview them, show them rough sketches, Miro, Figma. I'm going to talk about this in a second, very, very rough sketches or even something that actually works. We recruit these people. It takes time to recruit them. Actually hiring a recruiting coordinator, sort of a research coordinator just to recruit them. It takes time at our size. But the idea is that we get them from like people who feed reviews, they send us feedback, they send requests. Every one of them gets to be like, hey, why don't you become design partners? We also sell to customer-facing teams. Think about salespeople. They tend to be pretty extrovert. So it's like you bring them to talk, they're going to talk forever. So like we don't have that concern. And you continuously iterate to give them feedback. Now this comes along with the development process. I don't think you can detach it from development process. Basically, it's a continuous process. We don't have sprints or production dates or something. We release multiple versions a day. I mean, probably nowadays, maybe couple of hundred versions a day. Every developer can push stuff to production. There is no formal QA process. There is automated QA, but you don't wait for that. And that allows us to sort of bring something in front of a customer with their data. Not just like, hey, this is what you think. It's like, oh, this is my data. Interesting. Doesn't look like the 3 should be 3. Maybe it should be 4. I'll tell you a story. Like 3 months ago, we were developing a feature that allows customers to edit something that essentially goes to their customer relationship management, CRM. And we're like mid-development. It wasn't even like close to be ready. And I meet the PM in the hallway, and he's like, hey, I just gave it to a customer. And I'm like, did you say it's going to be ready next month? And he said, yeah, it's going to be ready next month, but I gave it to a customer anyway. I'm like, but it doesn't work. It's like, yeah, I know it doesn't work. I gave it to the customer anyway. So like, explain it to me. So he's like, he's on a Zoom call with a customer, and the customer's like, yeah, this sounds intriguing. So he's like, do you want to take it? Look. He's like, yeah, sure. So he gave it to that customer. I took it in a second how, and the customer's like, I'll try it out. I'll hit save. And then I asked the PM, he's like, save doesn't work yet. And he says, so, and no, we saw it together. It didn't work. So the customer got this error message 8173, he's like, hey, send me the error message, I'll fix it. Next day, that particular message was solved. But if you kind of understand the dynamics of the intimacy we were creating with the customer, the customer didn't care. He actually got a working version the following day. The PM didn't feel embarrassed. I mean, not in any way, obviously. So that allows us to iterate very, very fast. That makes me sleep at night because I know the customer has seen it, it's validated it, and we've reacted pretty quickly. That, of course, comes together with something that we internally call LA, which is limited availability, which means all of the new features always go through a step where no customers can see them. So 99% of the software updates that we do don't see most of our customers. For every feature, there's going to be a number of users or companies. We can do it either way. Now we have a GUI that a PM can actually select, which people. But that means I can take it to this particular user, just let them run the feature. Nobody else is going to get affected unless there's an abysmal bug somewhere. Or to a particular customer. And that goes through a process, maybe 1 user, 1 customer, 50 users, 10 customers. But whenever we feel it's ready, then it's like then we take it to what we call GA. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But until that point in time, we have at any point in time, I don't know how many, but I can tell you that right now we have certainly dozens of features that are in LA, each one having their own like customers, personas, users. There's no way I would even be able to guess like which 80% of them are, because the PMs are like managing this whole process, getting feedback throughout the stuff. And then, of course, when it's ready, it's a big reason to celebration. We call it GA, general availability. Then we kind of push the button, goes up to all of the customers. Again, we're a 1,000 people organization. In my world, it's big because I've hardly worked this size of companies before. So there's a lot of coordination. You got to teach the salespeople, you got to touch customer success. So there's a whole process around getting it to GA. Which we couldn't do on a day-to-day basis, even if we wanted to. Like day one, everything was going to GA. My partner and CEO was demoing something, and throughout the demo, the software was updated. Like, I didn't see this before, which kind of made us realize you don't want to do it like regularly. But on a monthly basis, that goes to all of our customers. Then there's the documentation, there's education, there's a lot of rituals that happen. Product operations take care of all of those rituals around release of software. So that's kind of the magic. I think the magic comes a lot from those design partners, and happy to take any questions here.
So there was like this note about no QA, which and there's a short discussion here from Sebastian and more about what does non-QA mean. So you mentioned automated QA once, and so what does that mean? So there's no QA processes, like no people in charge of QA. How does that mean?
Yeah, so developers are responsible for the stuff to work end to end. They push the button to get it to production, they get the error, they see the logs. So it's up to the developer to make sure the thing works. There's no like station or stop where QA comes in. They can write automated tests. I mean, the developers can. There is a small QA team. I mean, we're like a 200 engineering organization. There's maybe like 3 or 4 QA people. Whose job is sort of to help with, I don't know, cross-functional stuff, with infrastructure, with really sophisticated use case. Like you want to test integration with CRM systems. That's, engineers don't even know how to do this, or I don't know, come up with like fake data and other things, but mostly the sort of the day-to-day cycle does not involve QA people. So yeah, it's a little bit scary. I mean, when we started Gong, I was like, hey, we're going to do continuous development without QA. And I asked like the first bunch of people, what do you think? They're going to be like, let's do it until it breaks. Like 3 or 6 months later, they're like, does it break? What do you think about quality? And they're like, oh, it actually works better than my previous company, which was like the whole like sprint, 2-week thing, QA. It's like, let's give it a shot for another year. Like a year later, what do you think? Well, quality is still okay. We get NPS scores. If you know what NPS is, like a 70. Renewal rates are like over 90%. So like the thing works. So like, let's give it a shot for another year until it breaks. We're 6.5 years in and it might break one day, but we haven't reached that point yet. So who knows?
I think it may be tied directly to hiring policies. So you can hire people that can push the button and releases. Isn't that part of the thing?
Look, to be all completely honest, I think everything you do in any company ties back to company culture and what do you do. So we hire people we can empower. This is not just for engineers. This is for product managers. Like I give, they develop stuff. Again, I don't like micromanage that. It's true for all of our departments. So yes, I trust the engineers to do it. If some don't cut it, yeah, I mean, it's like we're not like there could be cases. People screw up, that's fine. Then they need to sort of bring like wine or treats or something to the office. I don't know. Maybe if they do it again, there are going to need to be 2 bottles of wine, and at some stage everybody's going to get drunk. But we haven't gotten to this point yet. So.
Another interesting question here is about coordination of release with other parts of the company. So you mentioned that like those daily releases are not coordinated in any way. They're like owned by the PM. But then there's the monthly release. Is that totally coordinated with all efforts?
Yeah, during the day, it's not even PM. The engineer is going to push stuff all day, all in and out, because this is like the PM wouldn't know about it. The monthly one is very well coordinated. Like initially it was like one pod that was the PM, so like I knew everything. Now it's like a release manager, and it's gotten to a point where we have to coordinate, and now it's like now we have a full-time person who's like there's a spreadsheet, Airtables, technically speaking, with all of the features that get released. If somebody says this one in, and then we kind of create release notes. It's in the product, outside the product, Slack channel, customer emails, customer success education, sales training, all of the rituals around it, but it's very well coordinated throughout the whole organization because everybody needs to know about new feature, right? You don't want people to be surprised.
And one question was here about deadlines. So marketing takes time. So, and there's no deadline. So we can prepare a campaign for a new thing or a new release. And how does that work with no deadlines?
Let's wait for the deadlines part in a little bit. So yeah, so I'll touch on deadlines. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't mean that there's no dates. I mean, dates exist, but not as sort of a driving force. But let's talk about this later.
Yeah, sure. Oh, wait, are you want to ask something, or we can go forward?
Go ahead. I got some chat stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but you're steering up the chat. People are commenting on things you say. It's like steering up, but we can move on. It's great.
Let's go. Okay.
So let's kind of tackle the next topic. 1 second. I just need to sort of wait for the chat to sort of go down. So the next topic is actually enterprise customers, and then we're going to go to deadlines. And enterprise customers.
Just one thing. A lot of people are asking if there will be a recording. Yes, there will, because I'm just answering all these people. So go ahead. There we go.
That's a good sign.
Okay. Okay.
Sure. Well, I should have invited Gong to the meeting. We have a bot that joins meetings and records them. I probably should have, but I didn't know.
Yes.
So anyway, I want to talk about enterprise customers because sometimes people feel that enterprise customers kind of contradict the idea of like rapid development or contradict the idea of product management in general, right? All you get to do is like address customer requests, and strategic customers do have unique requests, right? They're going to be like, hey, we need this, and it's fine. They're going to have their own unique environment, and they're going to have customized setups. When we sold to big companies like Google, obviously there's stuff that they need. By the way, many of the requests customers are going to have is we started think of it as an SMB solution, like for smaller businesses. I recommend to anybody who's starting a company, always start with smaller customers. They're going to give you feedback much faster. You're not going to go through security reviews. You're going to be able to iterate. In the beginning, it's all about product market fit. So if you start to go sell to the American Expresses, it's going to take you a couple of years until you realize there's no product market fit. So like everybody else, nowadays, some of the requests we're going to get from enterprise customers is simply like, hey, there's 4,000 users. This thing just does not load for, I don't know, a minute, or there's no paging or something, right? I don't like the word requirements. I like the word request is fine. And I think part of the issue is we as product managers have kind of been accustomed to those. I'm pretty old, but maybe some people are younger and not have been accustomed. But I've been accustomed to like the old way of selling in on-premises software. There's like big RFPs, 5,000 check marks. It'd be like boom, 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 boom. So we train ourselves like, hey, you got to deliver everything people ask for. You got to say yes to everything. Some IT folks are going to evaluate you based on number of check marks. And then eventually they're going to hold you responsible to data around them. And I think what changed a little bit is in the newer world, let me actually go here. In the new world, most of us nowadays sell subscription software and mostly to business buyers. So it's a bit different because business buyers don't care about feature number 775. What they care about, can you make the impact, right? I'm buying Gong for my sales team. Is it going to increase their conversion rate? Is it going to allow me to train people faster? So what we normally are successful in doing is get away from the hard commitments, like, hey, you got to do this by March, to, hey, do we all agree that what you want to do is coach people? Let's make sure that this coaching mechanism works in a new environment, delivers the value that you want. There's also alignment, business model wise, there's just alignment. If I don't deliver the value, we all know what's going to happen in a year. They're not going to renew, right? So it's like, it's probably like, I want to deliver probably as much as they do. So like we're all aligned. Like in the old software world, you could sell software, never get deployed, never used, you're fine, you made your money. In this current world, we're all aligned. And then the idea is, and then I'm going to try to move a step, like one of the, hold on, 3 seconds, I'll try manage. The idea here is, in many cases, we get requests from proxies, meaning we sell to, I don't know, Cisco is not a customer, let's assume it were. And then you talk to somebody at Cisco and they're like, oh, could you do this, blah, blah, blah for me? And sometimes you hear from salespeople like, Cisco wants this. And this is like, I always laugh at this because Cisco is a corporate. I think it's probably incorporated in Delaware or somewhere. And Cisco doesn't want anything because it does not exist in the physical world. It's a virtual item in some registry, right? The only people who can want something is people, right? So the right thing is like, hey, Bob Smith wants this thing. And I think the first thing you got to do is like, why does this Bob Smith want something? There's probably other people who really need it. Probably not even Bob Smith cares about it. Like somebody told him they need it. So the first thing we do as product managers is we kind of go back to those users or beneficiaries. It could be an end user. It could be like a CXO who needs a report. It's like, hey, what do you really need? And then suddenly it does not become a feature. It's more like, oh, I really need to do blah, 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 something that is more business centric. And then we go back to like, okay, if it's business centric, what we're going to do first of all, let's agree that we're going to solve this problem for you. The other thing we're going to do, this goes back to the previous topic, which is why they all interweave. I don't know how to decouple all of them, is we sign them up as design partners. So like, okay, so now ADP, when they joined and needed some access control things, like, okay, no worries, you become a design partner. We're going to work with you. You're going to give us feedback all the way. And the nice thing about the model that I showed you before is we don't need to develop the feature for them. What we do is just develop the LA, if you remember, limited availability. We just need to develop this thing to work for ADP in the beginning. So they're set up as a design partner, limited availability. They get to use it maybe after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 1 week, 1 day, whatever. There might be even something in the code that says, if it's ADP, don't display this or something. Sometimes we go as far as like something in the code that is specific to a customer. And because we have this feature flag mechanism, we're going to be like, okay, so now we're going to figure out how to scale it to other customers. We're pretty decent in how we do this. So we're going to like time it and like decide when to put it in the roadmap and how to do it, maybe in a different way, maybe through configuration, maybe through re-architecture. But the thing is, to productize it, we don't need to commit to any deadline because they don't care when we productize it. They just care when does it appear in their instance. So this idea of like the ability to deliver software continuously, the ability to sort of control who sees what, and then the idea of like, hey, I want to deliver value allows us to very quickly deliver to those customers and worry about productization later. And then we also learned the reason why I kind of put it before. It's like, this is a great opportunity for us. In 9 out of 10 cases, this is a great feature. It also benefits other customers, maybe even 99 out of 100 cases. And when I showed you in the beginning, it's like a #1 highest customer satisfaction, something for Gong. We're also #1 in enterprise software, which kind of freaks, I don't know, pretty crazy. But partially it's because we're able to deliver those like tailored functions that later become a more general purpose function. So, and then we try not to commit to dates. We've been in business for 6.5 years. My guess is we've committed to features with dates 3 or 4 times. half of which were like my thing. PMs, I hope none of my team is here, but sometimes I troll them a little bit. It's like, I really want the feature done. So I'm like, hey, this customer is asking for it. We got to do it by June. We can probably push the customers out, but like, I'm tired of them just not paying attention to this feature. So that's a way for me to influence their work. And of course, we all do it in harmony. But probably half of those were like, we all know it's an important feature. Let's accelerate it because we've been deferring it for too long. So that's pretty much it. We feel it's pretty successful. So happy to take any questions.
So I have this question from Amandeep, which is interesting because we've worked with a lot of smaller startups or startup that evolved like that. They had a customer and they filled some request, and he asks if you charge for the changes that are specific, if you ever charged. So I'm expanding his question is not if you currently charge, because now probably you have a better position with those customer, but have you ever charged for custom development for a partner?
I don't like this idea of charging somebody for features. Like, my developers are not for hire. And also if it's good for the product, like I should be paying them. Like they just gave me an idea and they're going to be a design partner. I mean, in all seriousness, we have one strategic customer now in New Europe. It's a pharmaceutical company. They asked for something that is a great idea for us in 2 years from now. We had not thought about this business direction. And initially they were going to pay us some a significant sum for actually making it happen. And we came back and it's like, hey, I was joking, like I should be paying them for getting me into the org, trying it with me, something the product doesn't do right now. Eventually, we're not going to charge money even for this. I don't like. It's also financially. It's like, is it ARR? Is it even the core financial metrics are hard. It's not recurring revenue. But no, I don't think it's a good idea to charge people. I think you want to see that they're committed. You want to see that they actually use this stuff. This is a reason to charge. But if they are a design partner, they're giving us feedback. Hey, their time is probably more important to them than the money they're going to give us. So no, we've not charged for a customer to the best of my knowledge.
There's a question. Go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about these enterprise customers, and I still don't understand how an enterprise customer, how creating, value for enterprise customers, even though it's a person. They've got a lot more constraints. They've got a lot more security issues and all this stuff. How does that not become heavy for a smaller business, in order to use this product? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, there are prerequisites. Like if we didn't have security, people are like, hey, you're going to have security 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can't use it. This is obviously something we're going to have to put up front. There's no way around it. This is almost like the baseline stuff. But we had this idea of one customer came back to us like, hey, we need this permission control. People can see this, we're a public company, whatever, some sort of information. We said, hey, this is awesome. We should have done it before. This is on us, right? It was, they just called us out for being just lazy. So what we ended up doing is okay, so you don't want to see, I don't know, dollars here. So we basically said, here's a feature. We're going to take out dollars from this column. It's a feature flag. It's for this customer. And for that customer, they don't get page number 5 and 7 that are too complicated to even worry about right now. So we just for them, it's we took it out of the for them. And then this thing gets productized. To the best of my knowledge, that particular feature is live for more than 3 months. It's not even live for all customers because we have to do it right. But it gave them the ability to start using the software. And by the way, they gave up on using maybe a page that took us too much time because they don't care about it. They're a new customer. And by the time we productize it, everything is, of course, going to work end to end. So this is an example of even a permission thing could be somehow worked out to fit somebody's needs.
Let me see if we have time. I think this is an interesting question going back to the pods. Who decides on, it's from Sebastian. I'm sorry, Sebastian, I'm rephrasing it, but who decides on, okay, that's an enterprise customer request. Who decides in the pod or outside of the pod, who's going to work on that? And how do you make this not interrupt the natural flow of the pods?
Yeah, that really evolved over time. First of all, a feature tends to lend itself to one of the pods. I mean, if it doesn't, then it's yeah, we figure it out. It's an exception, but normally it sort of lends itself to one of the pods. They're going to have a pipeline inspection question or a collaboration. So that's pretty easy. Once it goes into the pod, initially it was like each pod would worry about their own thing. Now we do have a full-time program manager who's like at least kind of creating this Airtable of requests per customer, because we want to communicate with them and most importantly with our teams, so that our customer success teams kind of know where things are. It took us a while, like 5 years before we hired this person, so I don't think you need it from day one. And how does it not interrupt the pods? Of course it does. And it will go to the next topic, which is why if you don't, I'm going to be like a little bit dramatic here, but if you don't commit to any deadlines, why do you care if something is interrupting you, right? So it goes back to sort of how you manage the whole like shebang around development. But I don't have a big issue if something useful comes in the middle, right? If it's a bad request, maybe we say, no, we don't take that customer. That's fine too. But once we've kind of committed to this, we basically said, hey, we think it's a good feature to have in the product. Let's go and do it.
I think we're ready to move on. Let's go for our next subject. We have two more, right?
Yeah, we can stop after this one or do.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions in the bank, so but
we can skip the last one. The last one is kind of less maybe
whatever we make it.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of provocatively kind of worded this why deadlines are even and sprints are bad. It's kind of two different topics, so I'm going to use two different slides for this. I truly believe, by the way, in my previous company I founded was in year 2000. That was, or even a little bit before year 2000. That was in the previous century, not just a decade. I mean, we went through the 2000 bug, and ever since we kind of never had. So I never had like deadlines in the last 20 something years. So I mean, it's doable. And I'll tell you why I think conceptually deadlines are bad, and then we'll talk about like what does that mean, right? And I tell my engineers, I mean, engineers don't work for me, but people in the team, I'm telling whatever, it's like anybody who wants to listen is like, we pay dearly for, I mean, of course, for you all, I mean, you can hire people, like don't pay them a lot of money. We actually, we kind of compete in the market for talent. So engineers are kind of not cheap these days. And what we pay them to do is actually do a good engineering job, which is making trade-offs. And there's three things you typically do a trade-off. It's like, what do you develop, at what quality, and how fast? And what we pay strong engineers to do is kind of make this trade-offs. Like, hey, I want to spend more time, do it better. Or actually we can take a little bit of this out, make it faster, these kind of things. And what I never understand is how come you're paying these people so much money, and then you tell them, hey, guess what? There's one thing that you don't have control over. This is time. So I don't care what you develop as long as it's next Tuesday. And I'm like, so why are you paying these people so much money? Just tell them what to do, how to do, and go. And I mean, it's like, it's crazy, right? Because I want the developer to be, as a product manager, not just as an engineering manager, I want a developer to come back and say, hey, if I spend 2 days more, it's going to be a better product, or it's going to be more robust, or I'm actually going to refactor some stuff that the next version of the product is going to be good. And I want to have this discussion versus like, hey, I committed Tuesday. So this whole idea doesn't make sense to me. And by the way, the other thing that people have done is like, well, if you tell people when to do stuff, they're pissed off. So now you kind of this new trick, which is like, let's ask them when they think they can deliver. We rely on the fact that nobody ever knows when they're going to deliver. So now they said Tuesday. Everybody knows they're not going to make it on Tuesday, and then you can actually blame them for not making it on Tuesday. Problem solved. Everybody's unhappy, but hey, it's not your fault because you're the product manager. People told you it's going to be on Tuesday. So I really don't like the idea of like, so the idea is like, rather than kind of commit to a date, or rather than use a date as a driving function, we're like, hey, we are going to develop a new product. We want to release it in June. We do have a product that's in June. We're pretty confident we're going to have a product in June. I don't know exactly what's going to be the content. I don't know exactly what's going to be the quality, but this is kind of part of what they play with on a day-to-day basis. Every week or 2 weeks, there's no commitment to next week. There's a big thing around, June, and somebody asked about marketing launch. We kind of felt June was a good timeline, but there is no like weekly, hey, by this week, you're going to do this feature, because I expect these people to actually iterate. Remember the design partners? I expect them to change the content along the way. I expect them to sort of play around with it. Otherwise, they're not going to create a great product. Because if they're going to fall on what they thought is going to be the great product 3 weeks ago or 4 months ago, it's just not going to be a good product. So we tend to be very, very flexible with timing. By the way, it has enormous effect downstream on other things, such as, I mean, it's kind of obvious when I'm going to say it, but it's like people willingness to help other people. It's like, should be obvious, right? You're going to help new people, right? And it's like, well, guess what? If you're holding people to tight timelines, they're going to be like, hey, sorry, I just committed to Thursday. I'm going to do my best to fake it until Thursday. If you're like, okay, that makes sense. You just made a trade-off here. You're going to help other people. It's going to take another day. That kind of makes sense to me. I don't care if this thing is going to go out on Thursday or Friday. Has been working for us. I think it helps with empowerment. It helps with ownership. It helps with people having to lift their head above the water and figure out what's important, not. And engineers and product managers alike, right? There's multiple things they need to take into consideration, not just like, hey, we're going to deliver. I had a conversation today. I swear to God, somebody came to me and said, hey, we have to release this in May, but hey, look at this thing. We're going to do this, and this is going to be. I'm like, it's going to be an ugly product. He's like, yeah, but we got to release it in May. I'm like, who told you we need to release it in May? He's like, well, that's what I got. Like, who'd you get it from? I have no idea. Like, just push it out. And that specific thing is like, remember, go back to the LA piece. Any customer who wants this crappy stuff that we have right now can still get it because we can turn on the feature flag and give them the interim crappy product that we have. But we have no immediate rush to get stuff to general availability. We can still uplift the quality. We got time for this partially because we can still deliver to that particular customer. So that's kind of part of the story. The other parts of the story is like my usual thing around, like, I don't know, I never got the idea of 2-week sprints in general. I know 99% of the world develops in 2-week sprints. I think it's like, I think there's a couple of things. If you do a couple of, I mean, I don't know, of course it never happened to you, but other companies I'm hearing that people like just first few days of the week, they're like, okay, we're slow. And last week they're going to be like, oh, now we're going to start working. I've seen people come to Gong and they're like, kind of waiting on the deadline to come, and it takes them a few weeks to get the fact that there's no end of sprint that they have to develop. They have to develop deliver consistently. The other thing I'm seeing is you sort of, this is like I call it crosswalk. You develop something and then you start a new sprint. The content is like bound already, and now you get feedback from customers. You have to wait until the next sprint to sort of develop it, and now you kind of get some feedback, and now you have to wait to the next sprint to get it. And not like half of the sprints are not reactive. And I want people to continuously get new stuff. So whoever asked before is like, what happens if something comes in the middle? That's awesome. This is what I want people to iterate on. This is fun. And probably remember I told you this feature that was a bug and fix it along the way. That's fine. That's how I want people to work. And probably the last thing, I don't know if anybody like read any kind of Scrum material. You're going to notice the main reason why people came with this. They're like, engineers who basically got a hard time from the CEOs. Like they came to them like, Tuesday, you got to change it. So they kind of came up this idea of like 2-week buffers. Come on, Mr. CEO, just wait for 2 weeks. This is enough time that we can kind of get our act together. I think if there is an understanding that there's discipline for the business, product CEOs, whoever, then I think those 2-week artificial like time boxes, I really don't see any value in this. Actually, they slow you down because now you have to sort of like wait for 2 weeks each time. So hopefully that, I don't know, confused you a little bit because now everybody else works with deadlines, but we don't. So happy to take questions. So
I have a question before I give I have my own question around. So I remember somebody quoting you on how do you force teams to stay in the challenge domain, and how does that tie to innovation? Like I thought that's a very important and interesting thing to talk about.
What do you mean by challenge domain? Like the problem?
Like what is the problem that we are solving? Just defining that.
Yeah, that to me is like a critical thing for PM in general. It's like somebody asking you for what was the last thing? It's like somebody asked us, does Gong translate? I don't know, the conversations that we take care of. Like, okay, interesting. I don't know, but like, why do you want stuff get to be translated? So I call it the 5 whys. If anybody, if you've seen or knows the methodology from the Toyota days, I mean, check it out. It's like 5 whys, Toyota, like the original lean and whatever, like from the probably last century. And they're trying to sort of like do the why. So why do you want translation? Okay, interesting, because I want to read this. Why do you want to read this? Because I blah, 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 blah. You go back to the root cause. It's like in the end of the day, I want to share with my manager something. It's like, okay, so let's talk about how to do this versus kind of stick to your request as it is. So this is like a fundamental way where we teach all of our PMs to not give up until they have understood the, like, I'll give you another example. This is crazy, right? We have part of what we do is transcription. We take conversations, we turn them into text. We got the best transcription in the world. We kind of have engineers working on this, like data scientists, but still people sometimes complain. It's like, it's not accurate. Of course it's not accurate. It's a machine transcription. And, normally you're like, yeah, people complain about, and I basically challenge the team to ask the question, why do you care if the transcription is inaccurate? It seems like a dumb question. It's like, of course I want it accurate. Why would you care? And it's not that we still don't know the answer is. We have pieces of the answer, but it's like when you go ask the question, like, what do you want to, like, you can read it or you can search it. And like, why do you care if some words are wrong, right? So, I mean, this is like an extreme example, but I encourage everybody to figure out the root cause because the answer might be different.
Lulu, you want to ask something?
Yeah, actually, it's probably trust, right? Because people don't trust machines. So if they don't see something that's really accurate, they lose trust in the results. Like sometimes it's
Well,
about
Reed, you're
that.
amazing.
But
So you know what the answer is? And
what?
I joke you not. Everybody in the crowd who's going to laugh right now, but we have several languages where the transcript, we use a third party for some languages and it's crap. Can you redact this part afterwards? Anyway, it's not good. And people lose trust. So you know
It's
what
all
you do?
about trust, of course.
You know what
Yeah,
you do, Reed?
So what do you do?
There's an easy solution. You hide the transcription.
All right, that's a good one.
Then you get back trust. So this is like getting back to the root cause. It sometimes help you. I kid you not. We just made it took it from a prominent position to a very hidden location. And then we put a message that says, by the way, it's machine transcription is not perfect. Customers are now silent in these particular markets. So yes, going back to the root cause is an awesome way to sort of figure out what you're solving for.
So I do have one question when it comes to this space. A lot of people say, my customers in the past and whatever, they're like, well, we have engineers, like they're waiting around. We need to like give them work. Okay, like what happens with that?
Well, I wish we had this problem. We need more engineers. I don't think we have a problem of giving them work.
There's the other side of managing the load and the context switching. We had several questions like that.
Part of the sprint, part of the agile sprint thing is trying to control that, so.
Yeah, I think, look, the team is very, like going back to the original pod idea, that the team works very closely together. I mean, they sit in the same room. They have their, I don't know what it is, like rituals, dailies or whatnot. So if there's a situation where you sort of have to make decisions, they sit together, there's a PM, there's typically an engineering lead, and sometimes the engineers, depending on context. And then there's like, okay, what do we do first? What do we do next? This is not something that gets to like outside the pod kind of thing. Sometimes it's like, hey, this engineer's got some free time, give them something from the bottom part of the backlog, and that's fine as well. Sometimes it's like, hey, go fix some bug or something that, yeah, again, this is completely inside the pod, or technical debt, they can do that. So doesn't get up to the one level up.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next one, yeah?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's go for the next one.
Yeah, sure. So this is like the last piece. This is sort of more Gong-ish, to be honest. I don't think it applies for every piece of software. But I think what we found out over time is, and I think it's a big part still of Gong's success in the marketplace, is that people are a little bit sick of in applications that you have to sort of type in information and like get back results on the other side. Jira-ish applications, not we use Jira, so nothing wrong with that. So what we try to do is application. This is a philosophy thing for us. It's like try to do applications that require less and do more. Like when I start driving, I bring up my Waze or Google Maps or whatnot, and I don't draw the way. I kind of expect them to tell me where to go. And in many ways, we've kind of done this in a similar ways. And I think software is heading in this direction, Gong or not Gong. And I'll give you an example. Gong is, whenever you have a call, Gong is going to tell you this is an action item. And the way it does it is machine learning. It's like, hey, we transcribe the call. I'll have to find out for you something, whatever. And the idea is like double down on those type of capabilities that are more require less from the user and give them more benefit. So more examples. The heat map I showed you before. The users don't need to do anything about it. We just quote unquote scrape their mailboxes, create it for them. There's, I don't know, topics in a call and many others. And I'm not going to bore you with the details. And the other thing is also, it comes together. It's like, hey, we've done all of this stuff for you, but make it look simpler. I think a lot of the things that people are challenged today is cognitive load. I think people underestimate the cognitive load that all of us have. So this page that I showed you before is listen to a call. It looks very simple. I hope it does. And we could have made it look like this. What happens if you open those sites? Like, hey, there's like action items here and questions and keywords and sentiment and other things. But we very, very deliberately decided to sort of not make it look simple, even if fundamentally there is sophistication there. I'm sure that if we had like optimized for discoverability, we would have done something else, but the optimization is for simplicity. And the same thing is like transcription, not just even for English. It's like you have to click to get it, just making people's life easy. In the same way, like we show you the account timeline, we make it look like a WhatsApp thread. Again, just to sort of make people, I don't need to think about it. It's not so much enterprise software. It's something that's very simple. So I think the sort of the future of software is more and more stuff that understands you, does stuff for you, make it simpler for you. So you don't have to sort of, you can work with 20% CPU versus 80% CPU. You go home, you're less tired, you get more time for your kids. So this is maybe the last part of why I think we help people like the software.
I'm going to pop up a question from Yara that I think is related to that, because you were mentioning on what do you optimize for, and that's something that related to the challenge, but also to goals. So setting up how will success look like? Can you talk about that? So how did you decide that you want to optimize for that and not for that, and who gets to decide that?
Our company number one operating principle is raving fans. So making customers happy is the number one thing. Somebody reached out to me and is like, hey, we have this goal of something. And I'm like, I don't understand what do you mean we have a goal. The goal is to make customers happy. If it's an internal goal, just forget it. I had this conversation today, literally speaking. I'm not like making things up. So making customers happy, making an impact. Not everything you can measure. Like, how do you measure the impact? We ask them questions. We measure NPS. I mean, we won't have time to cover all of the mechanisms for approximating the impact, but in the end of the day, I would always optimize for something that creates more impact to the customer, even if it doesn't help us against competition or perception or internal KPIs that some C-level person decided are important. We as a company, we've kind of trained ourselves to focus on the customer.
So there's no business optimization. So no, like we are gonna optimize for business.
Of course, a little bit. There's like user journey, PLG type stuff. It's like, hey, let's get users to find something. There's always like some parameter that is being decided. But I think the end game, it's always derived from some customer benefit that we think we're gonna get. We haven't got to the point where like, yes, we're gonna develop a checkout mechanism in the product to save time for our people to answer the phone. There's a little bit of that. But it's mostly make it fun, more easy for the customer to do stuff. Maybe 99 versus 1% or 95.5. So yeah, it's a wash.
Hey Lulu, do you have one last question? Our time is up.
No, I think that was a really good way to end it, because it's hard to understand, but it's basically develop it for the customer. And that's what you guys are doing. And it's the basics, but when you go out there, it's not always like that. So it's always driven by a business goal more. And it's really, and now you're saying that your business goals are pretty much written by the customer needs, which is pretty amazing. You don't hear that too often. So thank you very much, Eilon. I think that we got a good answer on why you have raving fans.
Thank you for hosting me. It was a fun discussion. And of course, feel free to reach out with any questions, anybody here in the crowd.
Yes. Again, I want to thank Eilon for your time and really fantastic insights. I want to thank everybody for coming in and joining us. It was fun as it is always. I want to thank Gal and Romy and everybody who took the effort of coming in. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.